Hello, welcome to Connie Martinson Talks Books.
Okay.
My guest growing up discovered that her grandmother had a different last name than her father or hers. Her last name was Crane, her grandmother's name was Cohn. Why? How? Her grandmother also spoke German and with a German accent. What were they doing in America? How did they get here? Well, in that sort of quest of a youngster, she later on discovered the truth behind it, then later received a Fulbright to go to Hamburg, Germany, to talk to these other women who had parents who were half Jewish, half Christian, and how did they survive the Nazi regimes. The book is called Divided Lives: The Untold Stories of Jewish Christian Women in Nazi Germany. It's written by Cynthia Crane and it's published by Palgrave. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for writing. I hope you got a PhD from this book.
Well, I actually had the PhD before the book came out.
All right.
But it was the beginning.
Second.
Right. I do deserve that PhD, I think.
You begin by telling about your family, your father, the doctor, and the anti-Semitism that they felt in Germany and then even in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Actually, my grandfather was the doctor, and he was helping people escape when he was in Nazi Germany, and he was actually on a hit list, the Gestapo hit list. He was considered Jewish because he had a Jewish last name, but his family had been assimilated and Christian since like the 1800s. Mm-hmm. So he was really no religion, he would say, probably. And my grandmother then was blonde and blue-eyed and Lutheran Catholic. She grew up. So they were in that mixed marriage that produced the children that I wrote about, who were very split between these two.
Who really weren't even aware they had a Jewish relative at times.
That's right, because they were so assimilated again into the culture and had been Christian. The family had been Christian for so long. They oftentimes didn't know that they had a Jewish grandparent.
Did you know you had a Jewish grandparent?
Well, since my grandfather really wasn't, I didn't know until I started digging this up of what it meant to have blood. It was a racial issue. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with religion. It did have to do with religion in a way, but think of how absurd it is. It was how much blood you had, and how do you measure how much blood you have to make you Jewish or not Jewish?
In reading your book, I thought of, there's a book called The Sweet of the Berry, and about people in America being half African-American and half being Caucasian.
That's right.
And how much you had to have in order to be identified as black.
Exactly, whether you could pass as white. And there's actually a story in the book, Ingeborg Hecht, who looked so Aryan that she could pass for Aryan. Yeah. And I've had a lot of people from other groups in the United States, ethnic groups, read it, and they really identify with a lot of these issues of how do you, in a culture, how are you trying to, of course they were trying to save their lives, obviously, but she looked so German that she could sneak into the ghettos and bring food to her cousin and aunt. And they just thought she was a German girl. They didn't even question her.
I forget which one, but said her sister or cousin was also that blonde and blue-eyed, and they wanted to put her picture in the paper.
That's right, exactly.
Representing German youth.
That's right, and the absurdity of it all. The book really shows how absurd and how much we really don't know about all the laws and all the intricacies of what happened. And also, I think that people think at that time that they were very organized, that the Gestapo was very organized, when in fact they weren't. They relied on everyday people, your neighbors, everybody to tell stories on you.
Cynthia, what was the ad you put in the paper, and what did it say over there?
Yeah, it took me about many months, 5 months or so, to really start to find people. It's quite a long time. I had to make contact with community leaders. I did start to put ads in newspapers, but I didn't really get a lot of response until it was in the daily newspaper. And of course, this is millions of people it goes to. And it was the weekend, and this one editor, and I thank her to this day, she decided to put in my little announcement, you know, I'm looking for people who survived, who were from mixed marriages, who were from Jewish Christian marriages. And of course, all of them were pretty much Christian. They were all Christian. They were practicing. As you said, they didn't even know they had any Jewish connections, which is what makes this book sort of unique. But I was looking for these people, and they put it in a column called von Mensch zu Mensch, from person to person. And there were also ads in there for like people who, did you see the bus accident last week? And could you please call this number? But people read this all the time, and I was just flooded with letters. But that did not open the door. A lot of times they just wrote to me and said, this is who I am. One woman told me she'd call me on a certain day and hang up the phone and then call me back. She let the phone ring 3 times. So the fear and the anxiety all those years later, you really realize how people's psyches were affected by that period in time.
You have 20 women who are in this book, and boy, they really do open up. I felt it was interesting, the difference between those who had a Jewish mother and those who had the Jewish father.
Yeah, there was a difference, and interestingly enough, and I don't know how this happened, but most of the people in the book who had a Jewish mother, their mother was deported to a camp. And that didn't always happen. We'd like your viewers to know that if you were married to an Aryan, you were protected, and most of these people stayed married. But if you talked back to, say, an SS officer, or you accidentally did something that you shouldn't do in public, you could just be rounded up and sent to a camp. And for the most part, that's what happened to those 2 Jewish women who, again, were in a mixed marriage. They were married to an Aryan man, so they were protected somewhat. But the men usually, the Aryans usually did not survive very long after the war because of the stress on the men being in that situation, being married to a Jewish woman. A lot of people divorced. Well, if they divorced, you sent your Jewish spouse up to his or her death.
Exactly.
Period.
Or the ones whose fathers, especially one whose father had been a dermatologist and emigrated to America. The parents divorce.
That's right.
He marries another woman. The mother never married. Their lifestyle changed, and they had to keep moving and moving downward.
That's correct. And actually, her father divorced her mother through the mail. So, and she believes that they would have stayed together had Hitler not come into power. So families were just torn to pieces. But I don't want to leave the impression that it's all sad, because a lot of the people have incredible strength. And that's why I wanted to do it, because I wanted to show the strength of human beings.
Some of them now have gone to Israel to find out more about what is the Jewish religion.
And often people ask me, you know, well, what happened to them afterward? Then did they embrace this Jewish side that all of a sudden came up because they had no relation to it growing up? Or did they become Christian very strongly? Did they leave their faith behind? And that was varied as well. Some people said, I want nothing to do with God. They turned their back on religion. Some people became born-again Christian. And then others kind of embraced, like you were saying, that Jewish side, although they didn't become Jewish, they didn't convert or anything. They did take trips to Israel or...
Interesting to me is the pervasiveness of the Nazi hate that still exists today.
That's right.
Including one of the women who says, well, you know, Jews are clever, they always can get ahead. And you think, oh, wait a minute, where did I read this one before? And the fact that they're not all, you know, there's still that hate that is there.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it recently. Unfortunately, history repeats itself, doesn't it? I mean, with the whole deal in Iraq and with the Kurds, and I just, there were a lot of similarities, at least the dictator in power. And, you know, people who survived during this time, during Hitler's time, I heard the most from them that they saw it coming a long time ago. So
very neat women. I do want to, if the camera can pick up the faces of the women who are in this book, now in their late 70s, 80s.
Yeah, some 90s.
Yeah, and 90s even.
Right.
Incredible women. Not all lovable.
No, no, probably not. I mean, I liked them all, of course, when I interviewed them because the stories were so fascinating, but they're very different personalities.
Especially the one whom I call the yes-no.
No.
The one who made an enormous success in business
Yeah.
herself, but she came out of poverty, never married, and first words to you, if you want to drink and smoke, do whatever you want.
Yeah, she's right, right. That's funny. Yeah, and she was very tough, and she was a survivor. There's no doubt about it. Unfortunately, there was one woman in my book who did not survive, who actually committed suicide a year after I was in Germany, and that was an unfortunate, very heartbreaking for me because when I was with her, she was very vibrant and alive, and she was always standing up for the underdog. And she was actually the only woman that I interviewed who had gone to a synagogue with her father. And then her father left her when she was 8 years old to escape, and she had that bond with him that was just amazing, and it just broke her spirit, I think, from then on.
And the woman who gave you the exact date that her mother was taken to February 14th, 1945, her mother was ordered to the work camp. When she returned, she would never discuss it.
Right. And then she would meet with the people that she was in Theresienstadt with at that date every year, and they had a cake and they'd all meet together, but it was like this closed, closed door,
did you
closed
go to
conversation.
Theresienstadt?
No, I didn't go there, but I went to a few camps, and that was...
Yeah, because traveling back 1 year from Hungary, we stopped there with a group, and there were all these people who returned every year from France, and they brought their children, their grandchildren, almost the sign, lest we forget.
Great. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few people said, well, I said, I think I'm going to go to Dachau and look, and they said, no, 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 because I was working on this when I was there, and they said, you have that every day, you're doing this work, and it was very emotionally draining.
And then Ursula Besselman, whose grandmother kept being moved because she was Jewish from house to house, lest she contaminate the relatives, and finally she commits suicide.
And that was a very moving, I think, part of that story, as sad as it was, but she just said the golden age was gone. I mean, she just could not live in this world.
Cynthia, what you learned from this, or what's the end result?
The end result. Well, I think I said earlier that it's incredible what we can handle, what people can handle, what they can go through, what human beings can stand and come out of it, and still have this resolve to go on. I also learned that you do need to be watchful and keep your eyes open to what's going on around you. I was going to mention that CBS did that series, Hitler, the Rise of Evil, recently, and I wanted to commend them on that program because it was wonderful, and I think that they were trying to make a point, beware, don't be apathetic, because these things can happen. Hitler came to power because a lot of people weren't paying any attention. They thought, oh, he's nothing, and
he'll change
gonna
when
happen.
he's in power.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
No.
Cynthia, it's a great contribution. I don't know whether it encourages mixed marriages or discourages it, but it is an eye-opener. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Will you please autograph my book? And we'll be back after a short pause.